All right. So I don't know exactly what the procedure is with this piece, but I suspect that Mr. Secretary, you will have to run the meeting given that I am member of the board but cannot exercise my duties in that role at this time.
All right, our ex officio member and interim trustee racking up the titles over there, but I will call this meeting to order at 6:03 this evening, of course, January 12th, 2022. Welcome to the new year again, everybody. Our second meeting thus far, so making quick work of the year so far too. Let's go ahead and start with a roll call. Let's do our interim trustee as an ex officio member of the board.
Present.
Member David Tate.
Present.
And Secretary Betts is also present. Let's go ahead and stand, please, and do our Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America,
and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation,
under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice
for all. Excellent. We will move on to approval of the previous board meetings, previous board minutes. I'll seek unanimous consent from my member David Tate to adopt those meeting minutes as constituted.
So approved.
Excellent. So now that we have our approved minutes from our last meeting on 1/4/22, let's go ahead and move on to an area of some meat and some substance, our township update. I would like to, if possible, turn over the floor to our interim trustee to say a few words.
All right. So since taking office last week on Thursday, we have been working to get the finances of the township set up for year 2021. We emailed the members of the board a document with some of the finances. So we'll review that in the general overview presentation of township finances. Give me a second here. We'll probably get some feedback, but you're all good. And so we'll make sure to get all of that in, and we're still working on that. Bill Jones has been getting all of the bank statements reconciled. He's been working with our office. He's been very helpful in being able to do that, given that we didn't have bank reconciliations for anything after July, and we still have to go back and fix some stuff. So we're getting through to make sure that when the annual report gets presented in a few weeks, that we're able to do that and have accurate information. There's still some more stuff that we'll need to do. We'll need to introduce some motions later in the meeting that don't have to go through resolution necessarily, specifically, but that will need to be documented, given that we need authorization from the board to be able to do a review of some of the financial transactions so that they're in the appropriate fund, as well as being able to take transactions that checks that were deposited, that were written out but were never cashed, making sure that we return those to the respective funds, given that some of those transactions are older than a few years. And it's something that we just have to do a regular process. It hasn't been done lately. We want to make sure that we're getting it done. Other than that, we're still working. There's no firm timeline as to exactly when that will be, but we're working to get our firefighters back in the office as quickly as possible. We're getting all of that work done, resetting workman's comp, making sure that we're working to get health insurance for when they do come back in and everything. So we're getting some work done. We'll have some more news in the coming days about exactly what that looks like, but we wanted to make you all aware that we're working in that direction. In addition to that, we will be working as well to introduce the township guidelines. Obviously, the finances have taken a little bit of precedence in this week, so we haven't been able to work through those, but we'll make sure to introduce that for your guys' consideration in the coming weeks as well. Okay. Let me see if there's anything else right now that we need to go through. I don't think that there is anything specific, but if you guys have questions, you can bring them up and I can also answer them too.
Member David Tate, any questions for the office of the trustee at this time?
No, I'll bring it up under new business.
Perfect. I'll do the same. With that in mind, let's move to our Deputy Fire Chief Jim Lewis, if he has an update for us from his perspective in the firehouse.
Good evening. It's been a busy first of the year. Since the start of the year, we've had 57 runs. This year, in 2021, we had 38 runs. I'm happy to report that the morale of the fire department has been vastly improved. We're starting to get some of the members who left the department to come back and volunteer again. Everything is looking very good right now, and we're moving forward and looking forward to a great 2022.
And folks, I appreciate your patience as I'm also, of course, recording our minutes for the meeting. So with that in mind, let's move on to our next agenda item. That's the sixth item on tonight's agenda, new business. We'll start with the general overview presentation of our township finances. Of course, for this, given that folks have been working nearly around the clock, I'll turn this over to our interim trustee who's been doing a lot of that excavation and piecing together the picture from the last few years even. Interim trustee.
All right. Make sure to start sharing here a screen. There's some couple of documents, and I'll show some of the overview numbers. As we said, we're still working to get everything set up, but we want to make sure that we can give you an overview as to what it looks like right now. There might still be some editing and making sure that the funds are in the correct stuff. So we want to make sure that you understand that it's not going to be what the final numbers look like in the annual financial report, because we still have some work to do to make sure that everything looks right on our end. But let me share the screen here. All right. So if you look through here, you can see this is the month-end balance sheet of the for 12/31/2021. For the rainy day fund, we had ending cash balance of just over $31,000. The general fund had an ending cash balance of about $199,000. We had for township assistance, we had an ending cash balance of $35,104. The emergency medical fund, so that's the loan, we had an ending cash balance of $512,643, and that does not reflect the payment of the final payment of the emergency loan, which we'll need today. We weren't able to get the information as to exactly how much we owed until today. We have been having to reset the accounts and access to all of those, and it just took us a little bit longer. It should have been paid at the end of last month. We were able to get in contact with them, and we had the late fees waived in this particular case, so we won't get billed for the additional about $10,000 in late fees that we would have accrued otherwise. We also have the emergency fund. We have, the firefighting fund. We have just under $73,000 left. Fire equipment debt, we have about $23,000. The cumulative fire has about $940,000 that you can see there. That does not reflect the transfer of $500,000 that occurred by board resolution. That one has been written through and have been sent to DLGF, but it hadn't been noted on our financing system. That transfer was noted on the 1782 notice for this year, the reviewed one. So we received the 1782 notice. It was sent to us. We asked for a couple of corrections. That was one of them, and so it'll be reflected on there so that the $500,000 transfer can happen. Just to give you a rough overview, after we pay the emergency loan and everything, we'll have about $850,000 left over on the firefighting fund to start the year. And so that'll be part of the money that we will use in a few weeks to do the additional appropriation on January 25th to be able to cover the expenses that we believe are necessary for fiscal year 2022. This is the same data that you saw here in a different format for the annual financial report. And we have more specific reports that we also sent to the board, but I don't think we need to review those specifically at this time. We just wanted to give you an overview of what it looks like. We'll be able to give more detailed information for future months as well. We're just getting started and getting that information to you. I'll give a moment here, Mr. Bill Jones, if there's anything that you need to add. I can cede you some of my time, with the board's permission, that is.
I hope they hired him, Bill Jones.
Just waiting here in case that Mr. Jones. All right. I'm not hearing from him at this time. I think we can move on to the next bit, if it's okay with the board, if he's able to get back here and we can.
Daniel, what do you need?
Some time to speak.
There he is.
Just checking. I gave him an overview of what the funds look like right now. I just didn't know if you wanted to add anything else to what I just spoken about.
No, it looks good. We just have to resolve the factors that need cleaned up, and then that fire fund balance will be pretty substantial.
So on that note, moving further on into new business, we do actually have some resolutions here this evening. Our second item under new business is resolution 2022-2, resolution declaring emergency fire loan fund dormant. The digest under that is the legislative body of the township establishes township assistance guidelines for year 2022. Interim trustee, would you like to speak to that resolution a little bit more as you pulled it up there? I appreciate it. Thank you. And to discuss what we're actually doing with that in plain terms.
Yes, so in plain terms, we've spoken about this last year. We've had a couple of resolutions regarding this as well. The emergency loan that the board approved in 2019 and what was received in 2020, the proceeds of that emergency loan should have been deposited into the firefighting 1111 fund prior to the end of 2020 as miscellaneous revenue, as directed by the 1782 notice for 2021. So we paid off, we're making out the checks to make sure that that emergency loan is paid off as of today. It will get sent in tomorrow, but we've spoken with them. They're going to be able to make sure that that appears reflected on their records as happening today. We have been trying to get to them all day today. We were able to contact them around 4 p.m. So we just want to make sure that that happens on time, or as quickly as possible from our end, since it should have happened last month. And so basically we would be moving the remaining of the balance to the 1111 fund where it should have been placed. It doesn't come without complications because some of the expenditures shouldn't have happened in that particular fund, but that's part of what we're also working to clean up, and that'll be one of the motions that we'll introduce later today as well. So that's what this resolution does. In plain sight, it just moved to the fund where it should have been, the money remaining on the emergency loan fund.
Mr. Chair, I call for the question.
Perfect. I was just going to say, Member David Tate, what kind of questions do you have for our interim trustee here on that note?
Call for the question.
Oh, perfect. My apologies. I misheard. In that case, I'll second that call. So we're going to move this resolution 2022-2 to a vote. I will also just take a quick roll call here. Member David Tate, how do you vote on resolution number 2022-2, Wabash Township, resolution declaring emergency fire loan fund dormant?
I vote aye.
All right, and to keep everyone in suspense, I will also vote in the affirmative. I will also vote in the affirmative. Thus, with unanimous vote, we have passed resolution declaring emergency fund fire fund dormant. Interim trustee, would you like to go on to resolution 2022-3 and begin to kind of walk through that for folks and perhaps get it pulled up?
Yeah, let me give me a second here, and I'll make sure to do that. Give me a sec. Okay, and so there's one last piece here that we want to make sure that we add here at the end, and we can amend that as well. But basically, this resolution states, It authorizes the township to pursue a population growth-based maximum levy appeal, and would establish a committee to write the needed report. And so it says that, whereas the township is transitioning to a combined full-time and volunteer fire department, so it's a combination department rather than being a volunteer department with a few paid guys, we want to make sure that we find a sustainable source of funding. That's the whereas clause 2. So whereas the Wabash Civil Township needs to find a substantial source of funding to meet the growing need for full-time fire protection in Wabash Township. Then it goes on to quote the part of code that defines how that petition would go through, the process that it would undertake. And then it's basically saying that this funding mechanism would allow us to generate the necessary permanent revenue stream to ensure the Township Fire Department can meet the needs of our community. A side note there, that's particularly true if we're able to get the whole 15 cents maximum levy growth. We think we can do that. It'll take some work because of the 2020 census that we've mentioned has some issues in Wabash Township because students that would have counted towards the population growth of the township were out of town. So we want to make sure that we'll have to do some extra work to make sure that that goes through, but it's part of the process. Nothing comes easy, and we're going to work to get it done. And then the resolution would resolve that the township is authorized to submit a maximum levy appeal based on population growth. And then it would also define what the committee would look like, and it would be composed of a township trustee, board members, Mr. Bill Jones, fire department leadership. And I want to figure out with you guys how you also want to make sure that we include people from the community that have a vested interest or want to participate in the process. So that there's a process for folks to communicate with us if they want to do that. So you guys can edit it as you like, or suggest, we can talk about it.
Mr. Chair, just so I understand this resolution, excuse me, correctly, under where you have, whereas the Indiana Code states that a township may petition the department. By department, can you be specific?
Oh, I can add that, yes. Petition the Department of Local Government Finance.
Thank you. The second is the fire department leadership is composed. How would we specify that?
So it would essentially be the chief and the deputy chief. I just wanted to be a little bit vague at the language because we might have the chief back in the next couple of weeks. So we want to make sure that it doesn't have a specific chief listed so that, it's department leadership.
And so just for my clarification, the Wabash Township Firefighter Association would not necessarily be involved in this, or would they? Would the fire department leadership subsume the fire department? Yeah. Okay.
So fire department leadership would also include members of the association. So for example, Mr. Jim Lewis would be one of them, as well as, deputy chiefs right now are also a member of the association too.
Okay, so very good. Thank you.
The department leadership. Both pieces.
All right. Yeah. Thank you.
Yep. And so any thoughts as to what process you want to have for members of the public that want to participate? I think it's important that members of the public that are interested in participating in this process have an ability to do so.
I think that we could, go ahead, Member Dave.
I'm sorry for interrupting. I'm just wondering if we should establish a maximum number on this so it doesn't get unyieldy.
Sure, we can do that. And the board, and I would suggest that the board select the members if there's a selection of folks that goes through, that the board select the members based on who participates, what they bring to the table, and and keep it and make it so that you guys can make that determination.
Okay, and so that represents both parties.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
I was going to note that perhaps, obviously putting something up on our website, but perhaps even something as simple as a Google form for folks to share on social media. So folks here tonight, if we put this out, maybe they can go and share that just to let their bubble, their folks, their friends, family know, neighbors know, and perhaps we can post this on our next door. I know that we have some folks who actively participate in these meetings, but also are active there too. That's very neighborhood oriented. There's obviously a number of neighborhood groups on social media. So I just kind of ask that folks would share it there too, but perhaps we could do so with a Google form. That might be the best mechanism to collect all the names.
Sure.
That's my thought.
Yep. Good. Shall we call for the question, Mr. Chair?
Oh, I think we would need to amend it first just to make sure that it includes that. I can add it, and members of the public to be selected by the board.
Just so there isn't any question about this, should the fire department, I'm looking at composed of the township trustee, the board members, Mr. Jones, and the fire department leadership. So your point is the board members would select what community members would be part of this committee, right?
Yes, correct.
Okay, I'm just wondering if anybody would question if the fire department should have any say in that. I'm fine with the board members selecting that as long as there are a mechanism to be fair and equitable as to who is selected and a maximum number.
What do you think that maximum number should look like,
suggest
Member Tate?
I'm sorry?
What do you think that maximum number for folks on the committee as a whole should look like?
An odd number. I think once you get any more than, well, if I look at the current board, 2, trustee 3, Mr. Jones 4, the fire department, let's say 3, now you're at 7, add 5, you're up to 12, but it's got to be an odd number, 11 or 13, or you're going to get stuck with perhaps a vote problem.
I would be fine with 9 or 11, I believe, in terms of a number.
For total amount of people?
Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts, interim trustee, between 9 and 11?
I think that makes sense. So if you look at this, I believe you have 4 between the elected officials, 5 with Mr. Jones, 3 roughly speaking from the department leadership side, and so that goes up to 5. Sorry, I can't count. 4, 5, 8, and so I would still say 3 members of the public, so that it adds to 11, or
Okay.
5 and it adds to 13, and that's okay.
I'm
case,
fine either
I
way.
would suggest
Yeah,
11,
so
just to
somewhat
keep it a little bit
nimble,
on the
you
lower
know,
end of
not getting too big,
just to make it a little bit more
too many.
manageable, but either one
Yeah,
is
exactly.
fine
I
with
think
us.
that 15 might be too
We
many.
can work as a group.
I think 11 might be preferable in that case.
I want to add a side note here that I appreciate that we're having a conversation about the number of people in the committee. That's local government right there.
The way it could have been, should have been, and is now.
Correct.
Yes, exactly.
Ex officio member and interim trustee Valentine, would you be able to add in verbiage for the number not to exceed 11 members total, if you're amiable to that?
Okay, I'm gonna change this to 4 in case the department leadership only has 2 people involved, up to 4 members, and then the number of individuals in the committee will not exceed 11.
Did you turn that off?
In that case, did we miss a piece? Because to my eye, I think it might be ready to go ahead and call that question.
And I think that
1,
Mr. Tate would
2,
have to help
3,
and if he's
4, 5, 6, 7. I call for the question.
Excellent. We do have that. I will second the motion here. Therefore, we'll bring resolution 2022-3, resolution authorizing, actually, you know what? I'm so sorry. Can we be specific, authorizing Wabash Township to pursue a population just in the name? Would you be acceptable to that?
Go into the study and get the jack that plugs into
Yeah.
this. It's a white jack that goes down the floor and plugs into
I'm
the.
assuming that's what you meant,
Bring
Brendan,
that out here.
that change there.
There, and then also in the title block as well, I believe. Maybe it's just my version.
Oh, you mean here for
there
the
we go.
title of the
Perfect.
resolution?
Yes, please. Perfect. So with that last minute change, we will bring resolution number 2022-3, a resolution authorizing Wabash Township to pursue a population growth-based maximum levy appeal to the floor for a vote. Member David Tate, how do you vote on resolution 2022-3?
I vote aye.
Aye, yes.
And I, Secretary Betts, will also vote in the affirmative. Therefore, resolution, third resolution of the evening, fourth of the year. Pardon me, second resolution of the evening. No, is that right? Chair, I'm so sorry. The name of the resolution, is it 2022-4, correct?
No,
No, that
3.
would be 3 because the first resolution was the township guidelines, which is currently tabled, and then the second one was the one we passed, and the third one is this one.
Just got ahead of myself there. My apologies. So we will, we have voted to pass resolution 2022-3, resolution authorizing Wabash Township to pursue our population growth-based maximum levy appeal. And then, of course, on to our next resolution.
Extension.
See, we never did that.
In the
The growth.
hallway.
All right, and so 2022, did you say for 2022-4, was that what you said, Brendan?
Correct.
All right,
correct.
so I just wanted to speak on before we go that I would recommend the board table that resolution. I've spoken with Mr. Jones, and given that we have been working on this particular piece of getting the township finances in order, he hasn't been able to have time to speak with us about a possible contract. And so he's told us that he would get back to us,
the heater.
and then we would agree to some amount, and then we would present that contract to the board for review and approval.
Perfect. Well, then good notice for the public. Definitely, obviously, good notice for the board. We are looking at signing a contract with Bill Jones to act as our financial consultant, of course,
Good.
a role he has fulfilled in the past and currently fulfills for multiple townships across our community. So we'll keep tabs on that, Chair. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. We will then move on away from new business. Pardon
It's
me.
not charging. Plugging it over there.
Yes, so before we move to away from new business for a second here, there were 2 motions that Mr. Jones believes are necessary for the township to be able to do some things. They don't have to be authorized by resolution. They just have to be properly noticed in the meeting minutes. And I'll tell you what they are, and I can write them in for you guys to see them.
Okay.
Since I know that you don't have them specifically. But the first motion that he would need would be that the entire 2021 transactions be reviewed and the correct fund responsibilities be implemented for those transactions. It's just
fine.
to make sure that we are getting we're getting the transactions
fine.
in the
So,
right place. So obviously one of you would have to introduce that motion. And I can show you the text so that you can read it out. And so let me share the screen, even though it's not a full-on thing, but so you can read it here, okay? So give me a second here. All right, give me a second here so that I can share what those two are. Okay. So those are the two motions that Mr. Jones suggested that the board authorize and pass, either by unanimous consent or whatnot. So the first one is there. An example of that, for example, is that the attorney's fees shouldn't have been paid out of the firefighting fund or the emergency loan fund, and that's where they currently were paid off from. So that's one of the examples of transactions that will need to be reviewed to be placed in the appropriate fund. And so one of you would have to introduce the motion and the other
Excellent.
would have to.
Thank you. Do we have a motion on the floor?
I would so move.
Excellent. A motion that the entire 2021 transactions be reviewed and correct fund responsibilities be implemented has been moved on the floor. Member David Tate has unanimous consent for his motion. Let me record this properly in our minutes. Excellent. And do we have another motion on the floor?
Yeah, and I can read what, as the interim trustee, I would suggest on advice of Mr. Jones, their likely to be financial advisor in the future. The motion would, from the board, would give the trustee authority to return checks that are no longer valid but still in the accounting system to their corresponding funds. So funds that the trustee has authorized, like for example, let's say that you cut a check for $200, it gets sent to the wrong address, it's still in the system, and it can't be cashed after 2 years. And we want to make sure that those funds that haven't been cashed and past the point when they can be are returned to the proper place. This should always take place at the end of the year, and it's part of this regular bookkeeping, but we would need board authorization to do so.
Mr. Chair, just for clarification, those checks that were written that have expired the date of financial utility, have those been deducted from the line item they were charged against?
Yes,
Okay,
they're still on the books as that they're an open check, but they're not valid anymore because the township check's only good for 2 years after
Yes.
it's written in.
thank you. And Mr. Chair, if calling for a motion on the motion that says from the board that gives the trustee authority to return checks that are no longer valid but still in the accounting system, the corresponding funds, I so move.
Excellent. Seeing that motion on the floor, Member Betts, will give unanimous consent. Therefore, the board has moved to endow the trustee's office with that authority to make sure we can keep our books clean.
Yeah. And you can look forward to another one of those at the end of the year when we have to do it all over again for whatever transactions we need to balance before the end of 2022.
Mr. Chair,
any other discussion pieces?
Just for those listening in, can you explain why that might be necessary?
Yes, I mean, there's a variety of reasons why that could be necessary. It could be checks that either the original check was lost by the recipient, and we cut a second check, or a check that was cut and then voided for whatever reason. All of these are reasons why it could happen. We think, for example, right now there's an outstanding like $22,365 check that, as I understand it, this was in 2019, and it was cut and it was sent to the wrong address, and we had to cut the check again, but it's still appearing on the financial as our accounting system as part of the opens. Checks that are still out there, and they would no longer be valid or cashable, and we already paid that. We just haven't removed it from the system.
And would that check be written again?
No. So all of these are checks that have already been cashed.
Okay.
And it's just that for other checks have been cashed, right? We've already paid those bills. It's just that there were either duplicates or they were voided for whatever reason.
Very good. Thank you.
Excellent. Are there any other motions or other questions? Seeing none, we'll move on.
The trustee's office has nothing to suggest.
We'll move on to our next order of business then, which will be old business, of course. And let's see, we, of course, have
Mr.
discussed-
Secretary, I do have a couple of things under new business. If I can introduce those?
Yes, of course. We'll move on back to the new business.
So these are points for discussion that I think the board and the trustee have agreed that we need to address based upon the current situation. What we are working on are plans to update and compose a trustee manual and a board manual, none of which exist currently. We're looking at the state statutes and a very general, non-specific list of our duties. So we're going to work on that. We're looking at policy to review the contracts and seek board approval for those type of contracts in which the board and the trustee will work hand in glove to make sure that both parties are in agreement with that contract. We're looking at employment guidelines from the Wabash Township Fire Association on hiring firefighters and keeping up their certifications. And I also want to make note that we've had an extremely positive conversation with the Area Plan Commission as to the growth in our township, and they are making plans now to initiate a strategic plan in cooperation with the relevant parties. So kudos to the board and the trustee and those that were helpful in getting these 4 items moved to the current working agenda. I think this is a very positive step.
Yeah, and if I can add something here, Mr. Secretary.
Sure.
All right. Those pieces are important for a variety of reasons. Somebody said that we're in the waiting room, so let me add them and then I'll go back to talking. All right.
Who do we have that we're adding? If you could.
His name is Stephen Murray.
Thank you.
With a V, not with a PH. And so those would, for example, be important because we want to make sure that there's already, some manuals for the trustee's office in particular at the state level that are, available through the SBOA and other sources. And those are important, but we also want to make sure that we're creating some operating procedures here and that we're working to establish like how the board and the trustee will interact and make sure that we're having a positive relationship. Also, it's very important to us that we have at least some guideline documents that the board and the future board and trustees can refer to as to the duties of their office, responsibilities, particular dates and times that they need to be looking at, where to get resources, et cetera, because we want to make sure we're entering an election year. And we want to make sure that whoever comes into the office next is able to do that. So, we might get reelected, we might not. We want to make sure that we have a transition in place and the ability for new people coming into work as elected officials in the township to have the opportunity to have all of these resources available. And as we build that up, I think it'll be easier to transfer from one board and one trustee to the next one so that we can continue the business of governing here at the township. We want to make sure that we work together and that we create that ability for future boards and trustees to also do so.
Other discussion items or motions on the floor? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to our old business, an item that we've talked about previously and have addressed earlier on in this meeting. We have our resolution that has been previously tabled, the first of the year, 2022-1, resolution defining our township assistance guidelines. The legislative body of the township establishes township assistance guidelines for the year 2022. It is some more kind of annual housekeeping for the township. The board has the duty to establish these guidelines for the trustee's office and done so once so far in this term, and we will attempt to do so again. And as will be covered later, we do have further meetings this year to continue this month, of course, to continue our business. As this is under old business, I believe our ex officio and interim trustee, Paul Valentine, might want to say a couple words on this. He alluded to it earlier.
Yeah. So we're still working through to review what changes we would like to make to the township assistance guidelines. We're looking at a couple of documents, including like local townships in other parts of the state, what processes they have. One of the things that I myself would like the board to consider is delineating different processes for different types of assistance. Like, for example, I know that we've spoken with members of the board about the need, like, for example, rent and utility assistance. And we felt that in the past, we've been hamstrung a little bit because members of the public have come to the trustee's office and asked for help and assistance with, let's say, with rent. And the township would flat out basically state that through our guidelines that we couldn't provide more than a certain amount in assistance. And that really limited our ability to even work with other nonprofit organizations to be able to get that amount down. And so we were basically discouraging folks from applying for assistance. We want to make sure that we strike that right balance so that our township can serve the needs of folks in the community that come to us for township assistance. And obviously we'll continue to do our due diligence to make sure that we're working with other resources to try to expend those funds as well. But we want to make sure that we're being more cooperative with and being able to meet those needs. And so different needs are different by definition. And so we want to make sure that we're going through and separating those particular pieces of assistance, say rent and utility, from other pieces of assistance and what that looks like. And we want to be able to create guidelines on that. I know that further on in the year, we'll likely have to also add a piece on insulin. I know that that's a big area that we're interested in as well as boards and as a trustee, about how we're able to hopefully be able to provide insulin assistance to folks in the community. So it's going to be a work in progress, but we'll get you something by the next meeting to be able to look at it. It's just been this last 6 days have been all about financial records and trying to make sure that everything is caught up to speed. So we haven't had the time to review it and provide you a good document to start on.
Mr. Chair, I just have a question, and I'm not sure how to broach this, but I think you and Mr. Betts were on the string as well from the previous trustee. There was a request to get assistance to repair a wheelchair. Do you remember that? I'm not sure. I didn't get any follow-up with that, and I didn't see that was ever followed through with, or that individual got assistance. Does anybody know?
There's very limited records here, unfortunately, when it comes to township assistance and other stuff. I can't tell you what that looks like and who that individual was. We haven't seen many requests for assistance that we have information for in recent months. It's something that just part of the struggle that we're having is that there's a lot of things that are not documented in the office. And so we're basically, not starting from scratch, right? We have folks that have experience on those different pieces. It's just that there is some gaps in record keeping that we just can't we can't easily overcome. I wouldn't be able to tell you who that person was or whether more importantly, whether they've received the assistance that they came to the township for.
So I'm wondering if that request either came through on the previous trustee's private line, or if that came through the office. I'm just wondering if it came through the office, the trustee website, it might still be in an email string somewhere. I'm worried that a person didn't get what they were asked for in a wheelchair, which puts them at mobility issues. And I'm just worried about stuff like that we need to do our best to follow up on that. And I know it's another log to add to the other things that we're dealing with, but these are people that voted us in, pay their taxes, and I think they need some due diligence here somewhere. I don't know how to resolve this, but if there's some way we can track the communication records, I would really like that.
Yeah. So the office myself as trustee and folks that in the office, we're trying to figure out how we can gain access to the trustees' website and as like, the domain, as well as records via email, etc. We're working on getting there. We hadn't had any success until today. We're getting closer, but we still don't have access to those. We are the office of the trustee is open to the possibility, if need be, of paying somebody to help us be able to regain access to those, so that we can actually have access to the records that are public, as well as to government websites, essentially, as the website of the township. So we're working on that. I'm hoping that I can provide you with a better update regarding that in the near future. We're diligently working on that, but anything that involves tech giant corporations takes time, and it's usually very impersonal, and it's tough to get through. So we're working with we reached out to a local firm that has experience on that front, so that we might be able to regain access to those and move it over to township property. Similarly, in the coming months, I will make sure to move the board website so that it's officially registered as township property as well, and that after I transition, and if I were to be trustee, then I'd still be able to do all of that. But if I were not, that the next person that comes in has access to the board website, has access to the board communication, and is able to go through and we have the ability to keep that continuity, and that we don't lose that important information or important communications, either in township assistance or other fronts, because the business of governing doesn't end with one particular elected official. It just continues with somebody else.
So Anhol, quick question for you, perhaps silly, but in the interest of due diligence, have you reached out to the former trustee in order to ask for credentials to get into the website and other software?
Yeah, we have we've had through our township council. We've also reached out to their individual personal counsel as well to make sure. So our township council has reached out to the former trustee. We've also reached out to her personal counsel, Ms. Celestina Horseman, and so we're working on that. We got a good response from Ms. Celestina Horseman today. We're just working, and we were able to get the password reset, so we're getting closer. The problem is that it still needs to. It has two-factor verification, and it still needs to. We have to change what the cell phone that it's associated with is. And so it's taking a little bit of time, and obviously, as you can imagine, the lines of communication aren't direct, like me just calling and being able to talk. So it's taking a little bit longer, but we're still committed to getting it done and making sure that we transition those documents and that property over to the township again.
Perfect. Thank you, sir. Member David Tate, do we have any other comments or questions on these fronts under old business? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on to our next item of business for the evening. This is an opportunity where we welcome the public to share their public comments, questions, and concerns. I'd ask the interim trustee if we have any emails from public folks sharing their public comments. And then, of course, we'll open up to folks here on our Zoom this evening and anybody in person with the trustee there. We ask for stakeholders and residents of the township to feel welcome and open to asking questions and sharing their comments. So at this point, again, we'll kind of check the email and verify, but please feel free to unmute yourself. Please feel free to use the icon on Zoom to raise your hand or physically raise your hand, and I'll look through and see, of course, if we have public comment there. Okay, seeing none. Oh, I do see a public comment from Vicki Weisty. You have the floor, ma'am.
All I wanted to say was how grateful I am to the members of the board for weathering the past who knows how many months, but also looking forward. Just you're setting such a great tone with this meeting tonight, with your openness and transparency and civil tone, which is wonderful. So just
Thank you so much, Vicky. I really appreciate that. Do we have any other public comment from folks joining us this evening? In that case, I will take a quick second to congratulate our interim trustee and thank him for his hard work. To thank all the folks who have been. That's a list of folks. Bill Jones has generously donated his time over a number of months. Amy Mulligan has done the same. Chief Ed Ward has done the same. Deputy Chief Lewis has done the same. Member David Tate has done the same. And a lot of the folks here on this call have done the same. So I, for one, am very thankful for all those folks who contributed. It's clearly not just the electeds. Obviously, sometimes it's in spite of those folks. So I'm thankful for this whole of community effort, for everyone who's participated over this time. And obviously not everyone's on this call this evening, but it's something special, I think. And I'm happy for just at least a brief moment of what feels like stability, but also I am excited to see if we can get to work and also move the ball forward on some fronts and not just stop the hemorrhaging. So thank you all. Perfect. On that note, our next item on the agenda is to discuss our upcoming meetings so folks know when they can join us again. Always we're reachable at board, BOARD, at wabashboard.com. You can always send your public comment there or find us, in public or via social media. But moving on to our ninth item on the agenda this evening is our future meeting dates for 2022. January 25th. Of course, of this year, we'll be meeting. Again, we expect to review a couple things, and I think the interim trustee has something to add here.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that the public was aware. So we've sent to post a public notice of this particular meeting that's taking place on the 25th. So that would be the additional appropriation meeting. I know that the board, we had, well, including myself at that time being an active member of the board, not just an ex officio member, we had stated in resolution that we intended to pass an additional appropriation. We'd also drafted up a resolution that stated what we believe that the budget of the fire department should look like for fiscal year 2022. We presented that during a DLGF hearing. That DLGF has a limited ability to increase the amount of funds going into a particular fund, so that request was denied. But we're going to go through the additional appropriation process to be able to make that number what we have stated in the past that it needs to be. And so we received confirmation from DLGF that we were all good to be able to host that meeting for an additional appropriation. And so that's what we're proposing. And so that notice will be posted on the Journal and Courier as well as the Lafayette Leader. So we make sure to communicate this, and those are the two places it needs to be noticed. And and so it would be to make the fund just shy, the budget for the firefighting fund just shy of $600,000. So that's the main purpose of that fund, and I just wanted to communicate that to you, that it's been noticed properly.
Excellent. So we do not have questions as to the legitimacy of the actions of this board and the office of the trustee. We have made clear, we have noticed these meetings properly. We have run them by the appropriate governing state agencies, and we will move that money in order to make sure our funds are in order and properly funded as best we can. And so that was, of course, our January 25th meeting of 2022. We will then meet again, at least regularly scheduled, on February 15th of this year as well. Did you want to note anything about that meeting, Chair? Member Chair?
Yeah, so that would, in one of those two meetings, it'll depend on how quickly we can get all of these things together. We'll be presenting the annual report. This year will be a little bit different in the sense that we don't have the trustee that carried out all of those expenditures presenting that document. That also happens during transition years between one term and the other, but we're going through, and so we'll have to note what those expenses were, the amount of township assistance that went through, and that's why it was important to us as well that we move the funds, that we have the authority to verify the disbursements and make sure that they were posted on the correct fund, and that impact what the final number looks during the annual report. And so we'll make sure to present the best numbers that we can. We'll note any information that we don't have sufficient paper trail backing it or whatnot, and we'll make sure to note that too.
Member David Tate, did you have anything you wanted to note about, of course, the upcoming meetings here?
No, I'm fine. I thank Mr. Betts and our interim trustee, Angel Valentin, for being such a positive influence in this township and how you've conducted yourself during these rather tenuous times. It's been a pleasure to work with you.
You too.
Thank you, David. Likewise. Perfect. In terms of announcements, other meat on the bone issues, we do have the chair of the Democratic Party has called a caucus to fill the now vacated seat for our trustee. We have an interim chair, Angel Valentin. It's my understanding that he will run to fill out the rest of that term. I don't know if we have any other folks at this time who have thrown in their hat on the filed the paperwork and thrown in their hat on that. Angel, are you aware if anyone else has at this time?
I am not aware that anybody else has. However, if you are interested for to file to run for the vacancy, I just wanted to communicate the deadline to submit that would be on Saturday. And you could contact Jackie Shosnick. However, if you need help getting in contact with her and you would like to put your name in the ring to run for a trustee, give a shout to either Brendan, me, or David. We would be able to get you Ms. Shosnick's information so that you could get the necessary paperwork in on time. The 18th.
Perfect. Again, this will be done as a caucus, which just means that the party that holds the seat will get together to decide who finishes the term. Of course, we're not unfamiliar with those in Wabash Township, but hopefully we'll have one time for the one time, I guess, right? So that is, in terms of announcements, this whole meeting has been something of an announcement, but again, if you're interested in putting your name in the ring for that open position, either reach out to Jackie Chosnick or, as Angel mentioned, reach out to any of us and we can make sure that you get connected. Now, on that note, I'll ask for any kind of final thoughts in this era of transition, if you will, from our departing board member, but also, of course, member Tate.
No final thoughts over here. If any, for members, actually, I'll add here, for members of the public, right now, if you needed to reach the office of the trustee, you could send an email to our personal account. So it's angel.v as in Victor, ALROD, at gmail.com. In the coming days, we hope to be able to create an account that has public records access and whatnot, and that it belongs to the township itself, so that we're able to do that. But we'll make sure to transfer any emails that come into the office of the trustee to that account at that time, so that it is a matter of public record that those came in through, because we want to make sure that everything is recorded and we're being as transparent as possible and being able to keep up with the open records laws for years to come, because a future trustee would need to be able to have access to those to share it if there was a request from a member of the public.
Excellent. And with that in mind, Member David Tate, did you have any closing thoughts before we move toward our final item on the agenda?
None.
Excellent. So seeing none from the board, having addressed public comment and having completed our agenda for the evening, having passed multiple resolutions, I will move that we adjourn this meeting at 7:01. Do I have a second on the floor?
Second.
Excellent. Seeking unanimous consent. Looks like I don't have any opposition, so we'll call it adjourned at 7:01. Thank you so much, everyone, for participating again. We look forward to seeing you here very soon.
Love the angel on the tree.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
I like to stay festive. Had to show it